Hi, welcome to the May 11th, 2021 Club Cubase live stream. We'll get started here in just a couple minutes. I'm going to do a quick audio test to make sure everything is coming through as expected on my end, and then we'll go ahead and get started. Bear with me just for a moment. Hi, welcome to. Okay, sounds like everything is coming through fine there. My name is Greg Undo. I'll be the host for the live stream today. And if you have not attended a live stream before, how this works is you could submit questions in advance on the at the email address of clubcubase@steinberg.de or leave the questions in the live chat field. We'll try to go through all the questions chronologically. So the people's ability to ask questions will be faster, my ability to answer them. So if you ask a question and you don't get an immediate response, if we could try to avoid asking the same question over and over again, we'll try to get through it chronologically as we work through all the different topics that have been sent in advance. Also, as you ask a question, if we could try to indicate, which version of Cubase, which operating system, that information is helpful as well. So you can say I'm running Cubase, Pro 11 on, Windows 10 or Cubase Elements on Big Sur. That information is also helpful. So we'll try to go through all the questions as succinctly and completely as possible. And we'll try to go for maybe about 4 hours today. So we'll just kind of get a sense of how everything is going. And if you are watching the Hangout live or the live stream live, you could go ahead and introduce yourself, tell us who you are and where you're from. And also, if this is your first time on the live stream, let us know that as well. And if you are, we'll go and see who's on the live stream. If you're watching this after the live portion, you may want to just skip ahead a couple minutes. But all right, so we see Fadi checking in. We see Sir Robert from Atlanta. And we have Ireland. We have Orrin Bynum from Maryland. Okay, let's see who else is on. All right, so we have Uno from Finland. All right, so we have Agent K, who's kind enough to do moderation for us. Also, we will have, if you want to search for topics that have been covered in Club Cubase live streams previously, you can go to cubaseindex.com, and our great resource of Steinberg information. Great collection. You can go to the Cubase Nation Discord. So we'll see Jan, who's usually on the live streams, who does the CubaseIndex.com. Jazz Dude is also helpful in doing the Cubase Nation Discord. And we also want to thank Agent K for doing moderation when we need it. We usually have a very well-behaved crowd. All right, so we have Detlef from Dusseldorf. All right, so we have Christian D68, Space Crawler, Trans 2020. All right, we have Jeff Zabelski from Chico. We have Taylor from Pine Grove. Millard Brown from Pennsylvania. Tim Weinheimer. All right, so we have Bochi from Ghana. All right, so we have Alex from Paris. Okay, so we'll go ahead and we're going to let some people get logged in, and we'll go ahead and get started with some questions here. So let's. So I see. Hi, Greg. I'm facing a disk cache overload when using Cubase. My PC specs are Core i9 10850K, 64 gig of RAM. This has happened in a session of 35 audio tracks. Any help? So I don't know if you have more than one, hard disk. Also, if you're just doing audio tracks or if you're playing back virtual instruments, if you're doing large orchestral sample libraries, that could be taxing your disc while writing 35 tracks. So it seems like you should be able to write 35 tracks, but if you have just another hard disk to try as a control, I would see if you could set the record folder to a different disk and see if you get the same information. You know, sometimes when we get that message, it seems like you have a fairly new computer, but that could be indicative sometimes of like a hard drive starting to fail. So I'm not sure if it's a like a SATA drive, you know, or if it's an SSD drive or not. But if you could maybe give us some more information on that and see if you try recording to a different folder or to a different disk, if you get the same message. Okay, so we have a question from Oren Bynum. How do I find the vocal presets and how can I turn up my lead vocal track louder than the other tracks when recording? I have problems there in Cubase 11. Okay, so if you wanted to get to the point where you wanted to turn up the lead vocal louder while recording, you know, one of the things that you could do is just set up a quick headphone mix if you wanted to. But, you know, one quick way of doing this, you know, depending on how you're recording. So let's say, if you wanted to monitor perhaps while it's recording, so a quick way of maybe doing this is using the listen bus. So let's say I just wanted to do a quick, I wanted to listen to all of my tracks going on in my project here. And if you're going through the control room, you click on this main tab here, and this main tab will expose the listen bus. So if I wanted to just take my lead vocal and let's bring that up louder, so let's say as we're playing. So, when we solo a track, we can have this track just kind of automatically mute all of the other tracks. But if I wanted to run it through the listen bus, now when I hit L, what I could do is just listen to, and at this point we could just have this listen bus, and what this will do is bring the other tracks down. So let me just turn off a couple of things and see if that. So, and what you could do is just hit the L, and what that'll do is just kind of dim the other tracks down, so that as you can dim the other tracks down by a specified amount of time. So once you kind of come over here, you could just say, or by specified dim level, so the other tracks will just be dimmed as we kind of work with that. So so that's one way. Another way is just to come over here to the channel itself, and as you're recording, you'll have pre-gain, and you could go to the vocal channel and adjust your pre-gain up louder during recording. So you could give that a try and let us know if that works out for you. But good to see you on the live stream, Oren. All right, just gonna check my audio interface here. Okay, so we'll go ahead and move on. All right, so we see Tubular Reviews indicating he likes ice cream. So usually we have Michael Teams is the one that gives virtual ice cream to everyone. All right, so a question. Where are the Cubase Media Bay samples loops stored, as I want to use my sample library plugin, ADSR sample manager, to include them in my sample searches and need to know the file location. So if you wanted to just kind of look for the included audio files, like the content, you can come over here and you could probably just find it in the media bay. So let's say if I wanted to if we have an audio file here, we could just choose to reveal that in Finder. And at this point, we could just reveal that location in like your Finder or Explorer. So just by selecting the audio loop, right clicking on it and say reveal in Finder, then that will go through and find the location for you. And you could just choose to include that particular file location directly in your search result. So, and if you wanted to do this in maybe the larger media bay, you could do that as well, just by the same manner. So if you wanted to go to your media bay here, any of the content files, you can just kind of come over here, say, let's go to VST sound. And, as we wanted to go through your different content libraries, you could just include these. So let's say I wanted to go to like loop set, indie rock, and then just right click. And then at that point, you could find the file location, again, just kind of by right clicking, and then you could, but just as you can see, you can just kind of find the location that way. So, so that should help you with that. All right. Okay, so we have a question. Okay, hi Greg, can you show how to clip gain part of an audio track? All right, so if I wanted to just clip gain this, I could just come right over here and I'm going to hit Shift X and I just select it with my range tool. So I can say, okay, I want this. I hit Shift X and then I could just go to the center line. And then at this point, you could just say, okay, I wanted to adjust my gain just of that one little particular section. So just select with the range tool, select a range, Shift X, that will split. You could go back to the other tool and then you could adjust clip gains just like that. Okay, so I have a question. In Download Assistant, do I need to purchase a separate license for items labeled optional? If not, how do I know which ones I already have? The entire list says install. So, you could look at, when you go to, let's say, your media bay, and let's go home and you go to loops and samples. These will be all of the different content that you currently have installed on your system. So, if you see that you have Bloom and you see all these files, you don't need to download that again. If you see all this different content at that point, you won't need to reinstall those. So that would be indicative that it's already installed for you. So when you look at the Steinberg Download Assistant, and we'll just open this up quickly here. You'll see kind of different content and instrument sets that are going to be listed as optional. All right, so I'll just skip that for now. So when you come here, anything that is listed as optional, you could just install. So, you could see so it'll just indicate that it's, that it's available to install, but, you could just kind of look and see exactly what contents. And if you go to different instruments, so say if I go to Groove Agent SE up here, these are all the different content libraries. So if we see these icons here, that generally means that is installed and you don't need to install it again from the download assistant. All right, I'm just gonna restart my Cubase here really quickly, and we'll move on. Bear with me just a second. Okay. Okay, wonderful to see Millard Brown on the live stream. Give me just 1 second here. Okay, and we have Cubase from Panama checking in and VK from Panama. All right, so let me scroll down. We see Tim from Mission Viejo. It's great to see you. All right, so let's open up a quick project and find some more questions. Okay. All right, so we have Michael Pierce checking in from outside London. We have Weezen Music from Orlando. Okay, so we see I use Cubase 10.5. Is there a way I can top up to upgrade to Cubase 11? So yeah, if you just go to the Steinberg online shop, you could just simply upgrade from 10.5 to 11 without any problems. So yeah, it's no problem at all. You just take advantage of it, and you could upgrade and update at any time that you want. So, all right, wonderful to see Jan from CubaseIndex.com. Yeah, and for the update, all you have to do is really just go to the Steinberg online shop, and you should be all set with that. Okay, we have a question from Taylor Zapp. Is direct monitoring in UR44 affected by the QMix, or does it remain static? So the direct monitoring is independent. So once we go to your studio setup here, and we have, let's just say, we see our audio interface to direct monitoring. So with the UR44, you could run the QMix without direct monitoring or with direct monitoring enabled. Ideally, you'd want to run it with the direct monitoring enabled, and that will allow you to, have access to the effect. So it's not. So, you'd probably, if you wanted to monitor, take advantage of the DSP on the actual UR44 to enable the direct monitoring, but it's not required by any means to do that. All right. So just see a question, Greg, are you still going to be doing a live stream on the Project Logical editor, or did it happen already? So I have a list of different scenarios. So I'm still kind of preparing for it. I've just kind of gotten swamped with some end of fiscal year stuff with work. And it's been busy with some projects. So, but we will be doing it, hopefully a couple weeks. It's something that takes a long time to prepare to make it all kind of go seamlessly. So hopefully we should see that coming in the future. All right. So I see, hi Greg, it's from Jeff Zabelski, emailed about Iconica Ensemble download yesterday, finally worked. Then I purchased the Opus with 4 downloads, strings, winds, brass, percussion, strings finished, winds keep stopping. So, I'm not sure if you did anything separate to actually, get it to finally work. But, it seems like, if everything else downloaded, check just to make sure size is okay wherever you're downloading it. I'm assuming you've done that, but, it can't hurt to ask. as well. And if you copied it from one download disk to another, maybe you have some freed up space. Okay, so we see question, how do you put L mode? So I think this might be for the listen bus. So we talked about this earlier with Oren's question. So if I wanted to take this, let's go through our control room. So if I solo tracks, you know, the other tracks are muted. But if I click on L, the other tracks are just going to be dimmed. And you could set the amount that they're dimmed right here with the listen dim control. So if you don't see that in the control room, you can now just click on main, and now you could adjust how much the other tracks are going to be dimmed just by that. So that way we could hear a track louder with all the other tracks just kind of dimming down. So instead of them all being muted, I could just dim them. So if you want to listen to a particular track, so that's kind of what the L mode is. And let me know if that's what you meant by your question. If not, you know, maybe you could ask the question our way, but I think that's it. Okay, so we have a question, essential plugin for mixing vocals. Please say, sir. So, you know, there's no essential plugins, you know, stuff that people will typically run, you know, will be a little bit of EQ. So, you know, often maybe taking some low end off, adding like a little bit of air on your voice here. You still love when I played Hey Jude. You know, a lot of times people will use, I should have told you were out of tune. You know, if we could add like a reverb to it. That was okay. Maybe just a touch of compression, not too heavy handed. Okay. So if I wanted to do like really heavy. So now we're kind of lost some of the natural dynamics. And if you needed to, depending on the vocal track, you could also maybe under tools just turn on a de-esser. So those are just, you know, delays are pretty common as well on vocals. But, you know, so EQ, compression are very typical, and often just a touch of reverb. I see some people, you know, will, you know, apply 16 plugins to their vocals and they can't quite find a sound, you know, so, you know, kind of keep things simple and pure. And that should hopefully, you know, get you a pretty far along your way. And, you know, it's always great to have a wonderful vocalist too. Okay, so we just see from Ted Muse, I'm running Cubase 11 Pro on Windows 10 and my presets don't work for Retrolog, Groove Agent, and others. Anyone experienced this? So, you know, when I wanted to go to, just do a new project here. So let's say I'll just load up an instance of Retrolog. Let's add this. Okay. So sometimes, you know, people will, let's say I have this as my preset loaded. And if you click on another one, it may take like, you know, depending on the sound that you're triggering, you know, it should just, you should be able to kind of just have access. And if it's loading a lot of samples, like maybe a big Groove Agent kit, it may take a little bit of time for all the samples to be loaded into the computer, you know, into the plugin itself. But see if you just are loading up, and there's a number of different ways of loading presets, but if you just click at the top here, like in retro log, and then if you just click once, that should just load kind of the preset. And then when you're done, you could just double click to close that if you wanted to give. So try it that way and let me know if that works for you, or if you're doing another method. Okay. Okay, so I'm just saying kind of further clarification. It says the presets don't show up, like it's glitched out. So if you're not seeing the presets, come over here to your media bay. So let's go to the media menu, go to media bay. And sometimes it could be, depending where you're finding it from. But if you come over here to VST sound, and then you should just kind of see the different retrolog libraries. So let's say as I come over here, just make sure that all of these are checked here. So, if you don't see those particular things checked, one, make sure that VST sound is checked here. And then you'll scroll down. And as you scroll down, you'll notice that all of these different library sets are available, and make sure that these are all checked. And if, and you may have to just kind of come over here, and if it is checked and you're not seeing anything, like when you click on the folder, try to come right over here and just click on rescan disk. And that should make that connection between the content and what's going on in, that make the connection between the content and Cubase. So give that a shot. So just come over here, make sure that it's checked. If it is checked, just select it and then right click. And at that point, rescan the disk. Okay, question. Greg, is it possible to assign a keyboard shortcut to a key on the keyboard? I would like to assign my lowest C to reinitialize MIDI, as there is very often a note continues to play after leaving the keyboard. Okay, so if you wanted to do that, this is where we could use a generic remote. So if I wanted to go to my generic remote, we set our input and output here. So, and I'm just going to assign a MIDI note. And if you click on the learn key, you can now just click on a MIDI note. It'll capture that MIDI note message. So I hit MIDI note 84. And at this point, I wanted to go to command, and I think we'll look under MIDI. And then we'll come over here to reset. See if there's. So now every time, once we have this configured, again, go to your studio setup. If you don't have a generic remote, click on the plus sign to add the generic remote. And now every time that I hit this note, it will now, and we go to command under device in channel category MIDI value, we put that to reset. So now every time that you have a MIDI note message, you could just hit that key and that will do the MIDI reset for you. All right, wonderful to see Sable Winters on the live stream. All right, sorry, my chat field just jumped on me. Okay, so we see question. Hi, Greg. Any way to remove or greatly reduce the snare drum in overhead mics using sidechain compression? Can't figure out the best way to reduce a too hot snare in the overhead mics. So let's see if I have a project that might mimic that. So I'm not sure if you have the capability of even just, EQing the overhead. So let's say if I wanted to just listen to the overheads here on these drums, and I'll just make it a little louder so we could all hear. Okay, so let's say if I want to take maybe the snare track here. Okay, I'm going to just route these two tracks to these two overheads. If they're not a stereo track, I'm just going to route it to a group. So I'm going to add a group channel to the selected. Okay, so, and at this point, I wanted to just apply. Let's try going to our dynamics and let's try just a compressor here. And I want to set the compressor to be sidechained from the snare. So let's see if we can. So I'll say, let's add our sidechain source. And I'm going to activate the sidechain. All right, so let's go ahead and just so say that's kind of, so while you're doing this, you could just set up you may have to have this snare actually just kind of feeding that. So let's say if I just take this, so now we're hearing the snare mostly in the snare. And I'll just kind of bring this down. So now as the snare is brought up, we can see that it's triggering the compressor on the overhead mics. Or the snare in the overheads. So we're really only hearing the snare. So let's say if I just wanted to. So here we hear a lot of the snare, going on both channels. So now you could hear it kind of being kind of cast aside in the, just kind of being diminished when the actual snare is playing itself. So that's how you could do it. Some people could also, just look at it and do, if you wanted to do even spectral editing, if it's like a really tricky thing. So let's say if I just wanted to go to the snare here, I could just go to project or go to audio menu, and you could go to, your extensions, and I'm going to go to spectral layers. And if you wanted to, find kind of the snare hits here, so let's say, and be able to, just diminish the snare hits, and you could, do that kind of, particular frequency selection if you wanted to, and just kind of delete, like the snare hit there. So you could do that as another method of being able to, diminish kind of the snare in overheads. So, but the sidechain, just, if you put it on the individual tracks or group and are able to kind of feed that from the snare. So, you'll need this snare up for the sidechain to engage to take it out of the air track. But if they're out of phase, that'll make a big difference in kind of cleaning that up for you. Okay, so we see, so I just see from Jeff Zabelski, he says, now my ISP is calling me a TB gobbler and wants to charge me more now after my PC Steinberg libraries downloads this month after Iconica errors multiple times. I need 150 gig more to download for Opus. So it's probably your ISP that was causing all the internet downloads and errors. So, I would tell your ISP that. It sounds kind of a little silly of them to say to you. Okay, so question from Oren Bynum. Where do I find the vocal presets in Cubase 11? So when we wanted to just come right over here, there's a couple ways. One is if you just go to Media and go to Presets, you'll see Track Presets. And we could choose audio, and then you could just look over here and find vocal. I'll just switch this to category. And here you'll see kind of all of your different vocals. So you can say, okay, if I wanted to come over here, let's say I have an audio track. So I'll just make this a mono audio track and I have nothing in it. And if I just drag, let's say I want female vocal dance lead, I could just drag that directly on the track and that will load up kind of all the EQs and you could just drag and create your own. So here's all your different presets that you could have with all sorts of vocal processing that's already been done. So we say, okay, I just wanted like a choir and I wanted that to be wide, just drag and drop, and all of those presets for tracks can just be applied. So once again, just come over here, go to Media and go to Presets. You'll see Track Presets, Audio, and under Category, select Vocal. And there's a lot of different vocal presets, and just drag them onto a track. And you'll see like that little green arrow where it says Audio 01. If you look to the left in the gray area, and that will just populate the presets, that track preset onto the currently selected track. Okay, so Michael Pierce wants people to smack the thumbs up button. So, all right, wonderful to see Gareth on the live stream. Thanks for sending over the project. I should have a bass part on it next day or two. All right, so Razel checking in from Denmark. All right, so we have Pablo on the live stream. Wonderful, from Galicia, Spain. All right, so I have Ali on the live stream. Great to see you. All right, so we have a question: how to find a WAV file which we've used in a project. So, if the file has been used in a project, you could go to your pool window, and this is all of the files that have been used in the particular project. So they're just kind of listed right here. So that's where all of the files are. If you wanted to, just to come over here, you could also, I think once you were in the pool window, that, you could also do stuff like, so if you wanted to make new versions or to select that file in the project, you could just kind of come right over here and that will find that particular audio file and select it for you. So now if I say, let's go to hat07, right click, select in project. Now that file would be just selected in a project there. So any audio file that's been used in a project, whether it's in the project window or was just used and kind of, maybe discarded or put behind other ones, they'll all be accessible in the pool window. So this will keep track of all the files that have been used in the particular project. Okay, so all right, so we have Richie Bergman checking in from Northern Germany. All right. All right, and Wasted Gamers is back for Cubase Brother. All right, it's great to have you. All right, so we have a question: is it possible to transpose more than 24 semitones when we select an audio event and transpose? So when we come here, we could just simply choose to transpose down minus 24, and that would be kind of a real time thing. If you needed to transpose beyond that, you could go to your audio, go to direct offline processes, or just go to processes and you could do pitch shift. And so I could say, okay, I just wanted to transpose this down. So we could do 16, and I could just, come over here and continue to do that as well. So say, okay, I wanted to transpose again. So I can say, okay, let's transpose down another 16. So we've now done 32. Add to process again. Let's add pitch shift. And now we've done 48, 48 steps down. So, so you could just do, just do that multiple times. So if now just delete all. So if you need to do more than 24, you could also, render the file with the transpose, do it again. I'm not sure. I know some people for sound design may take a particular file. So let's say, okay, I want to take this and let's go to our sampler track. So I could take just this particular audio file. And if I wanted to play it back here, I could just choose to. So if you want to transpose it down, 3 octaves. And if you want to play back at the same speed, we can enable audio warp to sync to tempo. So now I could. So if you're looking at it for more of a. So if you're doing more sound design tasks, also check out the sampler track for that. So. Okay, so we have a question. Hi, Greg. I want to create a sub-bass drop in Retrolog for pitch down. I am automating coarse pitch, but I'm not able to use a line tool. Coarse automation track gives linear slope. All right, so let's go ahead and take a quick look. Okay, let me just. Okay, so all right, so let's say if I just have one note here, maybe I'll just do that up an octave, maybe one more octave. Okay. Okay. So we have, create a sub bass drop in retrolog for the pitch down. I'm automating course pitch, but I'm not able to use the line tool. Course automation track gives step linear. So it could be your snap mode is turned on. So let's say if I wanted to do this in my MIDI editor and I have, let's say, just my line tool selected. So sometimes I get this question as people, let's say we have this particular note and I wanted to just see this as pitch bend, and we have snap enabled, which would just be this particular function here. And let's say I have this set to half notes. And now when I go to draw in a quick pitch bend, let me just select my line tool here. So if I go to draw in a pitch bend, sometimes, you may notice that different controllers may just, kind of as they're drawn in, if you see it too coarse, try just to, make sure that snap is turned on. So let me just set this to whole notes here. And we'll zoom in. So let's say, as we kind of work with this, like you may not be able to get more of points here that are, if you wanted those to be more refined. So try just taking snap off, and then you could freely draw in your pitch bend. But if snap is turned on and you have it set to kind of a high value, at that point, I could only kind of draw in like values. I can't go between the two values as easily. So try just disabling the snap, and that's just the letter J, and see if that will allow you to kind of get more, more fine, refined automation with your pitch bend. So it sounds like it's probably just the snap that's maybe limiting you. All right, so we have James from Pylon Records checking in, so that's great. All right, okay, we have a question. How do you get your Cubase sound to OBS or Zoom? So I have to do lots of, live streams and also lots of demonstrations because I don't get to do it in person as much. So what I do is I take my audio output of Cubase, and that's going out of a UR24C interface. And so that's what my audio is going out to. I take a microphone and connect that into a mixer, and I take the analog outputs of the UR24C into the same mixer, and that mixer is a Yamaha mixer with a USB output. And when I go to OBS, so OBS is actually just using the Yamaha USB mixer to transmit to, as the audio source for Zoom or OBS. And that way I could change whatever sample rate I need to. So that's how I do it. I know some people will set up, Voice Meter and some other tools for that. And I found that, if you for my purposes, if I need to cough and need to mute a microphone, or if I need to, change sample rates, I don't have to do any reconfiguration. So I just use kind of one audio interface for Cubase and one audio interface for the Zoom or OBS. All right, so we have a question. If QMix is used with direct monitoring, can I still monitor a louder recorded track without latency? So yeah, so once you have, the mix coming in, you could set the Q mix independently, so, and again, it's not directly coupled with direct monitoring for that, but, if you have direct monitoring, you could definitely use that. So it's advantageous. All right. So we see Sable Winters always likes hearing the Beatles and Stones song. So I'm going to have to tell my friend Vince Melmed that everyone loves his song. So he's probably like, why didn't someone buy it? So he's like, it's a hit on the Club Cubase live stream. I see Jeff Sabelski says, leave me alone. It's obviously the Stones. I was more of a Beatles person myself, but to each his own. All right. Okay, so Captenergy Music wants people to hit the like button. So I just see a question. Will complete control be modified to have a multi-rack feature like Contact Ever? So I don't work for Native Instruments, so I'm probably not the best person to ask. But you could maybe, check if Native Instruments is having a live stream, or maybe you could contact them. But I don't know what their product plans are, so they would probably be better able to speak to that. Okay, question. Do key commands have to be associated with an actual keyboard? Can you assign key commands to an external unit via MIDI, not US, or I assume that's maybe not USB, that has push buttons, knobs, sliders, etc.? So, most of the key commands, you could actually, if you go to the studio setup, and just like we're in a generic remote, this would allow us to take keyboards, maybe like a MIDI keyboard that has lots of buttons, keys, buttons, knobs, switches, and this will allow us to take an incoming MIDI message, and we could do this in banks of 64 at a time. Is it? Let me just. So maybe 80 or so. So all of these different, MIDI messages on this port, and then we could control, several thousand different commands inside of Cubase. Just, so it's, if you have all of your, if you like all of your keyboard shortcuts are taken up, we have lots of people that just have a MIDI controller, and the MIDI controller isn't playing, piano parts. It's just a remote control to, drive different functions in Cubase to work. I've seen where people will write the function with a magic marker on the key, and they know when they hit C3, it does this. When they hit, D3, it does this function, and they just have all of those mapped out for different functions using the generic remote. If you don't see the generic remote listed, click on the plus sign and just add a generic remote, and you could have multiple generic remotes, and you could take anything that's transmitting MIDI messages and have that, control functionality inside of Cubase very easily. Okay, so we have a question. How can I make my Groove agent save my samples in a session without them disappearing, and I have to give it a path of where it is saved? Okay, so, what you could do is once you have like your samples loaded up in Groove Agent, just open up the right window this time. That would help. Okay, so let's say if I just come here and I'll cut all my samples, and let's jump over to okay, let me just look for okay, so let's say if I just wanted to come here and I was looking for hits and stabs. So let's say, so I could just drag these samples directly. So if I have all of these kits and I've created my own samples, really all you need to do is right click on the agent itself here and just choose to export kit with samples. And then, you could save that, save that kit anywhere, save the project. And as long as you don't move the samples, and I know some people will just will choose to export the kit with the samples and they'll create a Groove Agent folder within the project folder. And that way, any samples that any kits that they've made to samples will automatically be recalled. And if they forget where it is, they could just go to that particular project folder and, import and just load up the Groove Agent kit. And that way it's kind of within the same folder hierarchy. So I would just, once you have that all created, just export the kit with samples and save it into your project folder. Okay, my chat field jumped on me. Thanks for all the wonderful questions. If you've learned something new, make sure you hit the like button. All right, try to find my space where I was. All right, I see Norm Williams on the live stream. Great to see you, Norm. Okay, so we have a question. Why licenses are checked all the time when we open Cubase 11 Pro? License check 1, license check 2. So, it just, it's the kind of, other programs will check your licenses as you run it. So it's just a way of ensuring that your license is functioning correctly. Okay, so I just see a question. Could you do a template for Machine Mark III and also a DAW mode? So I don't have a Machine 3, so I can't really create a template for it, but if Native Instruments wanted to send me one, I could create a template for it, but I don't have one for that. But there may be some floating around because there's obviously lots of Cubase users that use Machine Mark III as well. But I don't have one, so I'm unable to make a template for that. Sorry. Okay, so we just see, hi there, how do I mute, unmute, or solo all the tracks or selected tracks at the same time? Okay, so let's say if I have a number of selected tracks here, and there's just keyboard shortcuts. So let's say I take these tracks here. You could just hit S for solo, M for mute, and you could just hit M for mute, M for unmute, S for solo, S for unsolo. So just take your selected tracks and say I want to do these. I want to solo all those, and I wanted to mute those. Just hit the M button and S. So that's all you have to do. All right. We're glad that Norm Williams can make his first live stream. Wonderful to see you on. Yeah, he lives in Maryland. Okay, so I just see from DJ, please fix Alt plus drag issue on next update. So if you could let me know exactly what that issue is, but when I hold down Alt and drag, it makes a copy kind of as expected. So if you could let me know what the issue is, that'd be helpful so I could move the event. But if I hold down Alt instead of moving the event, I could make a copy. So if you could let me know what Alt plus drag issue there is, that'd be helpful. Okay, we see Space Crawler has to leave the live stream early, so thanks for joining us. Okay, wonderful to see Michael Teams from Weatherford, Texas. I think the ice cream is going to start for everyone now. And Michael wants everyone to hit to whack the like button. All right, so we have a question. Have a Lexicon MX300, and when I play back a MIDI file from Cubase, Lexicon does not recognize the tempo for delay via MIDI. Do you have any idea about it? MIDI sync is on my Lexicon. So generally just playing back a MIDI file is not going to make any difference or tell the Lexicon, to synchronize to that, but you probably have to set up MIDI clock. So try going to the project synchronization setup under transport, go to destinations and probably set up MIDI clock to the output port where you have your Lexicon MX300 connected. And now if your Lexicon is set to follow external clock and to sync, but you need to be sending MIDI clock, not from a MIDI file, but MIDI clock, from the port to where the Lexicon is connected to. Once you've established that, you just kind of hit OK, and then you could, and it may also, sync to MIDI timecode, so you could use MIDI timecode, probably MIDI clock, but they're kind of set up in the same location. So once again, go to transport to project synchronization setup and go to destinations and try MIDI clock and MIDI timecode to destinations and place a check where that MIDI clock or timecode should be going, where it's connected to your Lexicon. Okay, thanks for all the wonderful questions again. All right, so we have a question. Help issue with contact opening at tiny resolution in Cubase. Opens fine outside of Cubase. How can I fix this? Anyone? So one of the things it's probably, I don't think Contact, is a high DPI compatible plugin. So you may, it could be the nature because I don't think they've updated it for high DPI mode. So if you go to your preferences in Cubase, go to General, and then on the Windows platform, you may just see use high DPI or enable high DPI mode. And since 11.02, there's different high DPI scalings for Cubase. I would try to adjust those, but unfortunately, it's just, it's probably not scaling for high DPI resolution with Contact. So, and you could contact them to, you may want to reach out to Native Instruments and see if they have high DPI support for it. All right, so we have, hi Greg, this is Jaron from Norfolk, Virginia. So we have a fellow Virginian. So I'm presenting from just outside Alexandria, or just from Alexandria, outside DC. It says, I hope you're doing well. I wanted to know why Cubase 10.5 keeps skipping while I'm trying to record and how to fix it. So, one of the things I would try is, see if it's doing it with, multiple tracks, one track. I would try to also adjust this. If you go to select the audio interface, go to the control panel and see if adjusting the buffer size to be higher, if that makes a difference. So often when we do that, it could be that the computer is maybe trying to process too much information, and lower buffer sizes can make the computer work harder and could cause problems like that. If it's also skipping, and if you're on PC, you may want to check out something like, I think it's Resplendent's DPC latency mon, and that's like a little utility where you could turn off different parts of your program, because it could be something like a Wi-Fi or network card that could be causing an interrupt that could be causing that, and that's a little utility that you could use to kind of find that. All right, so we see Polydose is saying big ups from Granby Street. So I used to do lots of studio work in Norfolk in the day with my friends that went to ODU. So great to see people from Norfolk on. You used to always go hang out with Teddy Riley when he lived in Virginia Beach. So. Okay, we have a question. I made a new template for orchestral work, but for some reason I can't hear my metronome or count in. Any ideas? So if you're not hearing your metronome, and let's say you made a large template, there's a couple things that could be causing something like that. So let's say, we'll just go ahead and make sure that while you're playing, one that, it could be in the control room. So let's say if I'm playing and I hit C, a couple of things that could be causing it. If you're in the control room, you'll see this little icon here. And if you have that disabled, so you may have the click turned on, but it may be muted in the control room. So make sure that it's unmuted in the control room there. Also, another area to look at, I ran into this with a composer. He's going crazy, and he just got Sherlock set up from 14-bit MIDI. And one of the things it did accidentally was it would go to the click sounds, and it would adjust the audio click level all the way down. So make sure just inadvertently didn't have a control that would take the audio click level down. And again, that's under transport to metronome setup to click sounds, and make sure that you have the audio click level raised there. 9 times out of 10 when I get the question, it's just someone clicked here in the control room and muted the metronome through the control room. Okay, question. Hey Greg, is there a way to customize the track preset? I'm on Cubase 10. So let's say I have a track preset set up here. So I'll go to my media and we'll go to presets, track presets, audio, and I wanted this female voice track preset. So I will open up the audio file here. So let's say I wanted to tweak the vintage compressor and change the EQ slightly. So once I've done that, all I have to do is right click, and then we could save track preset and just give it a name. And at that point, that track preset you can find under users. So we'll come back here. Sorry for hitting the mic. That's annoying. You could just come over here to user presets, track presets to audio. And at that point, you could just see all of the track presets that you've just made. And you could just drag and drop that directly on again. So you can customize your track presets quite easily. All right, so we have a question. Hey, Greg, is it possible to invert the scrolling direction in the main window? I'm using Windows 10. So I think that it was in 11 and 11.01 that it was one of the scrolling got inverted and was changed back in 11.02. So I think it just kind of, I don't think it's user definable, but some of this scrolling behavior may have gone back to how it worked before as part of the 11.02 update. But I don't know of a way to customize exactly to toggle the behavior to switch either way. All right, so I see I have another tune to play bass on for Gareth later in the week, so looking forward to it. You know, see Tim Weinheimer is like, oh, I forgot about already made audio presets instead of wasting time to create it from scratch. You can still do that if you get paid by the hour. Okay, so we see from Taylor Sapp, when you transpose an instrument track via the info line, which is affected, the MIDI or the audio? So it's going to be the MIDI information. So if I come here, let's say I have one note. So if I play this, and let me just, all right, so let's say I'll just play this one particular note here. So in the transpose, we'll see that it's actually going to transpose kind of on the fly. So we have this going out to this note. So as I transpose, and let me just get rid of my pitch bend data. Okay, so now I'll come here and let's just transpose. So we're going to see that. So you could just see that the MIDI information itself gets transposed. So it's not transposing the audio, but just the MIDI data, and you could see that reflected in the actual MIDI events in the editor. Question, is it possible to link Cubase 11 with Dorco, or is there a plan to realize it? So I know that, as Dorco is being, created, we wanted to make sure that the highest priority was getting all of the advanced scoring and engraving functionality into Dorco. And I think as we go on, we'll see more integration coming. So I know that there are plans for it that I've heard of. So, but I was just on a meeting earlier today with Daniel Spreadberry, who kind of, heads up the Dorco team. So, so it is planned, so it may not happen immediately. But it's a huge process to kind of, integrate the two, but they are planning and working towards that. All right, so I see from Norman Williams, I wanted to ask a question, but I'm not sure you see me in the chat window. Let me know. So yeah, we see you, Norman. Just go ahead and ask your question in the chat field, just like you type that. So. Okay, so we see a question. How do I get pitch bend in a key editor back to 0? Okay, so and this was something that was kind of integrated into version 11. So now we could see, okay, I wanted my pitch bend, and we could see a semitones grid. So as we look at the pitch bend, so I have my note here, and if I wanted to, draw in, so we can see exactly, where, because there's 16,384 values of pitch bend, and depending on what the value is set. Now, a lot of times people do this and they want to come back to 0, and then they realize that they're a little flat or a little sharp. So in version 11, this was kind of revamped where you could set the range of semitones, and now we could edit that. But there's this little function here where you could snap the pitch bend event. So as I click to just enter in a pitch bend, this will just automatically snap to being in, so I could just take this point and now I could snap it one semitone up or snap it back to 0. So as we just kind of click this way, it's going to snap directly to being in tune, one semitone flat, two semitones flat, one semitone sharp, one whole step sharp, or being directly back in tune. And that's just in version 11, just to come here and enable snap pitch bend events, just like that. Okay, so you see from Gareth, says my audio is entering one ear and coming out of the other. So I'm not sure if it's a real question or not. So let me know if you're having a routing problem, Gareth. Just want to make sure. Okay, so we have a question. Hello, Greg and everyone. With an 8-channel controller in Mackie mode, i.e. icon, how to have the selected channel on Cubase Mixer always selected on a controller and vice versa. So if you have a Mackie controller, you will probably see that you'll have almost like a little outline of like 8 channels. So you'll see like little banks of 8 channels, like a little white line, and sometimes you'll see it indicated here, just almost like a little bracket. And those are the 8 channels that are currently being set and being controlled by the Mackie control. So you could generally, increment by 1 channel at a time, or one bank at a time. So if you have channels 1 through 8 selected, hit the bank button, it'll go 9 through 16. I don't believe that the Mackie control protocol allows you to select a channel and have that automatically be, to select the channel within the Mackie control. So like with this, I could, like with my CC121 controller, I could just select that, and that's the active control. So I think that's maybe a limitation of the Mackie control protocol. I haven't worked with one in long time, but all you have to do, so just kind of look for like the little, and you'll probably see it like right around here, like the 8 channels are selected, and you have to kind of select those, and you could see which channels are actively being controlled by your Mackie control. All right, so Gareth wants everyone to hit the like button so we get 100 likes before 8 p.m. in Spain. So All right, so it seems like John Costigan's maybe has his UAD and control room working, so that's good. All right, so we have Soren checking in from Sweden. Great to see you. Okay, so I just see, but please, you open 12 tracks, assign bus channel. The mix pan screen opens up with your bus channels beside the channel you have assigned. So messy and awful. Reaper and others don't do this. Okay, so let's say if I will just do a new project. Okay, so let's say I have 40 audio tracks. Okay. Okay, just rereading the question. Okay, so it says you open 12 tracks, assign bus channels, and mix pan screen opens with all your bus channels besides the channel you assigned. So messy and awful. So if you wanted to, you could choose, there's different ways of doing. So let's say I want channels 1 through 8 to have a group channel that's assigned directly below. So if I wanted to do that, I could just say, let's add group channels to selected channels. And if I choose to create outside folder, it's going to be placed directly underneath. Now let's say I wanted to assign the next 8 channels. And let's assign these to a folder, but I wanted these to go into like a group folder section. So when we come to add tracks, we're going to say selected channels. Instead of outside folder, we're going to create this inside the folder. And I'll do the same for the next 8. So let's say, okay, 17 through 24. Let's add the group channel to the selected. And again, I choose create inside folder. We add the track. So now I could have groups 2 and 3 all the way at the very end here, and group 1 just to the right of channels 1 through 8. So the choice is really entirely yours, how you want to, if I'm understanding correctly, if you want it to be placed directly next to it or directly all the way to the right, it's entirely a user choice. So let me know if that makes sense, Bob. Okay, question from Matt Elliston. Please, could you show the simplest way to punch in and out on a record armed audio track, please? Okay, so I'm going to select just a quick range. I'll just do, let's say, a short punch here. I'm going to hit the letter P. That sets the left and right locators. This will also be our punch in and punch out point. And then I could hit I to punch in and O to punch out. So as we play, I'll play along here. We have this track record enabled, punches in, punches out, and we have our new audio event. So just, you could set the locator range. And if you have just like a range selected, hit the letter P, that will move the left and right locators around the event, and hit I and O. And you could also enable these icons here on the transport. So I for punch in, O for punch out. So that's the easiest, fastest way to just do a quick punch. So as we do this, punch in and out just on that particular section, Matt. Okay, question. Will sidechain work with a third-party sidechain plugin in Cubase Elements 10, or is sidechain functionality built into the main software and plugins with sidechain is not enough? So I think with Cubase 11, sidechain was added in Cubase Elements 11. I could be mistaken on that, but at that point, so with version 11, Cubase Artist received very audio editing, and I believe that the Cubase Elements 11, so it may not be in version 10, but you could check the Cubase Elements 11 new versions, but I believe that the Cubase Elements 11 does allow you to do sidechain functionality now with any VST3 plugin, third party, no problem. Thanks for all the wonderful questions. I see we just hit 100 likes. Thank you. My chat field just jumped on me, so let me find. Okay, so I think I found my spot. All right, wonderful to see Jazz Dudes made the live stream. I was just wondering a second ago if he's made it yet. Okay, reading through different questions and comments. All right, so we have Unsalt the Earth has joined us for the live stream. Okay, so question from Michael Pierce. Okay, I can't remember if I've asked this before, but can you latch solos in Cubase? I believe you can in Nuendo, but being able to solo between tracks with a single key press could be cool. So, so I think one of the functions that you could use for this, if you want, that many people utilize is just a quick preference. So under editing, project and mix console, where you could enable solo on selected track. So like while this track is playing, I could, as soon as it's selected, so let's say if I have this soloed, then I select another track. So whatever track is selected will be soloed automatically without having to manually do it like that. So if that makes sense for your workflow, Michael, let us know. But again, that preference is under preferences, editing, project and mix console, and enable solo on selected track. So let me know if that is kind of what you wanted to accomplish, but hopefully that will help. Okay, so to see from question from Thomas Dietz, will Cubase run on an iMac from 2011? So it really depends on what operating system you're running. So if it's running, like I'm running Mojave on my Mac, it's an older operating system, and Cubase 11 runs great on that. But if you're running, an operating system from 2011, Cubase may not be functioning so great with that. It's, because it's been designed to work with the more contemporary operating system. So it's really not the year your Mac was made, but the operating system that it's running. Okay, question. Any plans to expound on the features of score view options, making the scoring print to PDF more intuitive for arrangement purposes? So, I'll take a look at just a quick selection I have here. So let me just load up a quick. All right, so say if I wanted to look at violin 1, excuse me, and violin 2 in my score editor. So I have this, and now if I wanted to print to a PDF, all right, so I'll just make this into a PDF. And I'll just try score May 11th. So it's kind of what I see. And now let's see if I printed it. Let me just. Okay, so I'll just come over here and we'll look at the PDF. So maybe if you could, all right. So now when I look at the PDF, I could see all the parts. I mean, whatever I kind of saw here in page view mode seem to carry over into the PDF score. So if there's any particular things that aren't intuitive, let me know. But that seemed pretty intuitive to me. But there's other functionality that you want Bongo John. Just if you could maybe clarify, and I could pass it along to the team. Okay, question. What are your top 5 hotkeys and why? So to me, and this will be different for everyone, G and H for zooming horizontally, Shift G and H for zooming vertically. I like being able, the P for setting like the locators to the selected range. Just the transport, start, stop, space bar, or the numeric keypad, if you're using that. Those are kind of my, key commands that I use repeatedly over and over again. So, but, if you want to learn key commands and be very proficient, one thing I would suggest is every time that you go to a keyboard, a function where you're going to the menu, try to substitute one of those every time you go to a menu and you see like a keyboard shortcut that's next to it. Try to utilize the keyboard, learn one new keyboard shortcut a day, and your proficiency and workflow in Cubase will increase quickly over time. All right, wonderful to see Graham Witcher on the live stream from Royal Wootton Bassett in the UK. I just like saying that. Okay, we see from Russ, thanks for the live streams. Christian D68 says 50 viewers didn't hit the like button. Come on, don't hesitate. All right. All right, question from Norman Williams. I want to ask about drum samples that I could load into my project at 120 beats per minute. If the sample BPM is 110 BPM, can I change it in the project once it's loaded? Okay. So let's say my project BPM is at 120 beats a minute now, and I wanted to go to different loops. Okay, so let's say here we look at different beats. All right, so I'll just go ahead and move this, let's say, to measure 1. All right, so when we see this, if the audio file itself has its own, often you'll see like a tempo indication. So many times, like the loops that you have, if I wanted to listen to this now and put on my metronome, all right, so it's not quite aligned with our metronome. But if the tempo is embedded in the file, so pretty much all the loops that you have in Cubase will have the tempo information embedded in the file. So when that happens, all you have to do is come over here and enable musical mode. And once you have musical mode enabled, it will now automatically synchronize to the tempo of the project. So if I slow my project tempo down, it's just going to play back perfectly in time. So say I want it to be 144. So select the event. The first thing I would do is just try enabling musical mode. You could do it directly on the info line for the selected event, or open the pool window and you could enable musical mode directly here. And that will place, you could do that for multiple events on the project window or in the pool. So if it has the tempo information, which most of the loops do, drop it in, place into musical mode, then it will automatically stretch to fit the project and to fit the tempo. Okay, so we see a question, Ableton Live versus Cubase. Which one is best for you? Cubase. So we'll keep that easy. So. All right, wonderful to see Robbie Bowling from Dallas on the live stream. Question, can I open Cubase projects in older versions of Cubase? So for the most part, a lot of times the files will open if there are functions. If you have Cubase 11 and you do something that's sampler track 2 specific, or utilizing the frequency 2 VST plugin or supervision or plugin that came in a later version, those may not work in earlier versions. So, but generally, like the parts, MIDI and audio and the mix information, if those components are common between them, will load up. So not every single function will load up to earlier ones, depending on what functionality is used. If you try to go from Cubase 11 to Cubase 5 and you're utilizing, 12 years of new features, that may not translate over, but for the most part, you could kind of jump back, a version or two, and maybe not everything would be active, but most of the media, the MIDI and audio and instruments, if they're available in both versions, will play back. All right, we have a question. Hi, Greg. How do I get the control room to attach itself when I have the mix console combined with the project window? I can't get it to come into play configuration. Thanks, Jonathan. And I think we had this question, may have been emailed in earlier as well. So what I do is you could have the control room just as a tab in the right-hand zone. So if you don't have the right-hand zone active, which it is by default, kind of click here and you can see your VST instruments, your media bay, but also your control room. So if you have a number of different audio tracks, you could have the mix console laid out for you here and the control room just kind of docked in the right-hand zone. So it's not going to be just kind of shrunken to fit into this, because the control room can be very vertically oriented, but now you just click on the CR tab and that's your control room. And you can see the control room functionality right there. And you could just toggle back and forth between different functions. So just click on the CR there and then you can see your control room. You can see the mix console here and your project all simultaneously. All right, so we have Maximilian Moose checking in. Thanks for joining us on the live stream. All right, and my chat field just kind of jumped on me. Let me find my spot. All right, our question. I ran into an issue today. Tried to preview items in the media pane. I could not play the media in the control room, but could play through the outputs. What did I do wrong? So, generally it's when we come over here, we could see like our previews here. And this is when I have my studio or my audio connections. So often if I disable the control room, sorry, just getting lots of calls today. All right, so I'm going to disable the control room and I have my outputs chosen here. So generally when I get this call, it's that people don't have like the studio set up, in audio connections where it's going to be set to the control room. So, generally having the control room activated will kind of play back, and this behavior may have changed a little bit in 11.02. And people often ask, why is it going through, and through the control room is often because these haven't, been assigned to a particular track. So, it may not know where to route it to. Sometimes I get this question also when people have their control room volume down. So you could check just a little volume slider over here and make sure that that is enabled as well. All right, so we see Neurotic Nexus who's joined us for the hangout in the live stream. Thanks for joining us. All right, next question. Sorry, Greg, still on the Cubase selected channel following the controller. Should I avoid the Mackie mode to have the selected channel synced? So I think it's part, and I could be mistaken, but I think it's, one of the limitations of the Mackie control, and I'm sure people that are running Mackie controllers could probably clarify to see, but many controllers, when you select, that could be the coming, because it's kind of like I select this and then the controller follows the track selection. I'm not sure if the Mackie control does that. So if your controller, has a different, way of synchronizing to the selected channel as opposed to initiating what channels are selected by the controller, then, you could try it. But I think most controllers that are Mackie control based may work under the premise that you're selecting the channels that are selected, that you're selecting the channels to work with by the selection from the Mackie control. So you initiate it from the control surface as opposed to initiating it from the software and having the control surface follow. So, I know some people who, won't utilize Mackie controls for that reason because they find it to be kind of a workflow killer. I'm not, but I don't have a Mackie control to test. So I'm not sure if you switch to another mode of your control surface, if that would change the behavior. Question: is there a possibility to use headphones with the Tascam Model 12 and control room? All right, let me just look what the Tascam Model 12 is just to make sure. Okay, so in looking at the Tascam Model 12, it's kind of a mixed console with that probably functions, it's more of a mixer that functions as an audio interface. It looks like just looking at it. So you should be able, if the headphones, are addressable as separate outputs. So some audio interfaces will have the headphones mirror the outputs 1 and 2, so that outputs 1 and 2 will be the same. Some audio interfaces, you could go to the control room and have a dedicated headphone output. So if you utilize the phones, you could come here and just listen directly to, if the headphones are on a dedicated connection port, you could do that there, or most interfaces will mimic the main outputs 1 and 2 out to the headphone mix, and so that the two will be coupled together. And at that point, you could adjust kind of if you only wanted to listen to not the speakers, but only the headphones, you may have to control the monitoring volume on the Tascam unit if they're going to be coupled together in the control room. But if it's just using the phones, then as a separate output, at that point, you could just monitor directly here through the headphones and have, independent volume controls. So we can think of the phones as the headphones that you would use for in the control room versus the headphones that you have for the Q mixes. And I see just a further clarification. I can only use the active speakers or the headphones. I have to switch out the speakers to use the headphones. So it sounds like that's a limitation of the Tascam interface. So, if it could be addressable, independently, you could do it in a control room. So I would give that a shot. But one other preference, if you try to assign the same outputs in a control room, one preference to be aware of is if you go to the control room mixer, is you can say exclusive device ports for monitor channels. Try unchecking that if you try to do it. I'm not sure if that'll work, and I think it may be just a limitation of the Tascam hardware from how you're describing it. Question: Greg, can I use my Tascam US 2400 as a controller? Yes, the Tascam US 2400 was one of those controllers that everyone thought was cool, and then they dropped the price to, I think, $500, and then everyone wanted one, and they couldn't make enough of them. And what the Tascam US 2400, if memory serves, is a 24-channel control surface, and it basically functions as 3 separate Mackie controls. So you would need to go to your studio setup, and add 3 Mackie controls. So you would come over here to plus, and you would see Mackie control 1, 2, and add 2 and 3. And you may have to, and you would have separate MIDI ports for each 8-channel bank. And you have to figure out which MIDI port is going to be the primary, so that they will function as 24 channels. Once you get the MIDI ports lined up, it'll probably be like Tascam US 2400 1 for 1 through 8, 9 through 16, maybe port 2. port 3, Mackie Control 3 may be under Tascam US 2400 3 in and out. And once you have that set up, it will function as 3 Mackie controls that are kind of chained together as one single unit. All right, question, how are you? I have a question, how to connect tracks to Mixer. So once you have a track, that track is automatically, selected and routed into the software mixer. So if you have an input, like if you're recording, what you want to do is go to your audio connections and go to the inputs tab. So studio to audio connections. At this point, you want to define all of your inputs. So if we have an audio interface with 8 analog mono inputs, I could come over here, click on add bus, and we'll say I wanted to add 8 mono inputs. And now we click add bus and I have my 8 mono inputs. So if I want to define the input, I would just go to select the channel here. We'll see our inputs over outputs. And then we could just come over here and define which input from your audio interface is being sent to this mixer. But any audio track that's been added, as an audio track is added, the mix console adds an audio track that is correlated, that represents that audio track that's been added. Let me clear my throat real quick. Question. Hi, Greg. What is the best way to find people available in VST Connect? So if you wanted to, let's say, go to VST Connect, I'll create a VST Connect here. Let me just get rid of one of my Q channels here quickly. Just get this configured. And if you're not familiar with VST Connect, what you could do is utilize it to record people remotely. So once you sign in, at this point, you could find users. So if you wanted to, let me just log in here. So like here are some of my friends that I've done, but if you wanted to search for users, I think that there are, different privacy concerns where, instead of just searching wildly through, other people that do have VST Connect configured. So there are different privacy concerns with that. But I think if you're looking for people, I would check with your friends or, just on the live stream itself, say, hey, I play guitar and I'm looking to do sessions over VST Connect. Does anyone need any, guitar parts, and you'll probably just on these sites here, like on the chat stream, or if you go to the Cubase Nation Discord, there's probably links and you can find all sorts of people that are doing stuff with VST Connect. Okay. Question. Hi, I hope you're doing well. I can't get my MIDI to come through my Focusrite interface, followed prescribed instructions, and I can see the MIDI in the computer, but no activity on my Roland JV. Need help? So make sure, one, that, if you have your MIDI interface on the audio interface, any MIDI interface that you have, if you go to the studio menu to studio setup, you should make sure that that you see it listed here. So if it's a Roland JV, I'm not sure if it's just a rack mount or if it's like a JV80, something, you know, with a keyboard itself. So as you're doing that, make sure that you have, you know, you add a MIDI track. So it's going to need to be a MIDI track as opposed to an instrument track by default. So we could set up your MIDI track and we could choose the output port where it's being sent to. If it is a keyboard, you know, you have this little MIDI activity indicator here. So you could hit a key and see if MIDI activity is coming in right there on the transport. One way to test to see if MIDI is going out, we have the MIDI track. We want to say out of your Focusrite, make sure that the channel matches the channel that you have set up in the JV. You can just come in and just draw in some notes, you know, have this part loop, and see a lot of the keyboards will have a MIDI in indicator light. So as we play this back through the correct port to the correct MIDI channel, we should see kind of a MIDI indicator light that the JV is receiving MIDI. So a lot of rack modules will just have like a little flashing light when it's receiving MIDI information. At that point, you know, because you're sending it MIDI, it may not be, you know, you may have MIDI going to it. And if you don't have the JV 1080 or the JV going out to a mixer to monitor the audio, or it defined as an external instrument under your studio, you may be sending MIDI but not hear it if there's nowhere for it to you know, for the sound of the JV to be, you know, monitored. So if you go to your audio connections, you may be able to set it up as an external instrument. So you can say I have my JV, but give those things a try. So check to make sure that A, you have MIDI communication, and, you know, B, that you have MIDI going out to it, and where is the audio going. Once the MIDI gets to it, it generates the tones, and how are you integrating the audio of that into your Cubase system. Okay, so just saying, all right, so seeing from Mindspitter Official, let me see, maybe this is a continuation of a previous question. I'll just do. All right, so just seeing, question, and do you control your bass at control room, or what do I see at your right? So I'm not sure when you say control what at the right. So at the right, I'm just seeing you know, this is my control room. So when it says control your bass, so this doesn't do any like LFE management, if that's what the question is, like, you know, working with subwoofers. But, you know, this is the control room on the right-hand side. All right. So, yeah, I see a lot of people repeating the same questions over and over again. If we could try to avoid that, I'll try to catch up. Thanks, Agent K, for moderating there. So, and, you know, we'll go through all the questions kind of, you know, as they were asked in order. So it may take me a little while to get there, but if we could try to avoid asking the same questions over and over again. All right, so I think we got the preference for Michael Pierce's solo and the function that he was looking for. And it says, I need to spend more time in preferences. There's all sorts of goodies in there. All right, just all right, reading through comments. All right, see a comment from Michael Pierce. I love the Cubase metronome. I think I've left countless musicians with that embedded in their dreams. It's always funny. Sometimes in the old days, we would hear it, like recorded as part of the tracks a lot of times. So I was like, oh, that song was done in Cubase. Like, how do you know? It's like they accidentally recorded the click track as part of their song. So I think sometimes it was intentional. Maybe sometimes it wasn't. Okay, question from Marxini. Hi, Greg. Is there a way to make Cubase select a particular controller every time I open an instrument track as opposed to it always defaulting to MIDI inputs? I think or to all MIDI inputs. I think it's always going to default to all MIDI inputs. And I think we may have done this last time, but let's say if I go over to my studio setup and I just disable in all MIDI inputs for all of these. So at this point, I add a new instrument. So it's even when there's no physical input, so it's always going to be set up to default to all MIDI inputs so that any controller that's actually connected can automatically transmit MIDI information. If you could let me know if there's a reason that you want it to go to a particular input, or for it, for a particular input to be filtered, Mark, that would be helpful. But I kind of understand what you want to do, but if you could just let me know if there's a particular workflow need, and I could perhaps pass that along. Okay, question. Hi, Greg. Can you please show how to remove DC offset quick and easy in Cubase 11 Pro, please? All right, so all you have to do is select an event or events, go to processes, and remove DC offset. And that's all you have to do. So once again, audio to processes, remove DC offset. And this is kind of one of those things that you should always do, like on your final mix. A lot of people, miss this step. And one of my dear friend Greg Lukens, it's who's probably has like the most amazing ears of anyone on earth. And that's the one thing that just annoys him. He'll be listening to someone's brand new release CD, and he's like, oh, let's open it up, put it in Wavelab, let's remove the DC offset, and let's call up the mastering engineer and tell them that they shouldn't forget to look for this because it's annoying, And sure enough, half the time someone forgot to remove the DC offset. And that just kind of like, a lot of times we will see that sometimes when you look at your waveform and maybe the waveform looks a bit asymmetrical, and that could be kind of a DC offset, just like the electricity in the studio that's affecting the audio. So once again, to do that, go to audio to processes and just click on remove DC offset. That's all you have to do. It's pretty easy. All right, question. How can I get notified about this live streaming? So really all you have to do is you can hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. So make sure you subscribe to the channel. And then we've been doing these, I think we kind of jumped up the frequency of the live streams to we were doing like 1 or 2 a month previously. And since the pandemic started, we just been doing 2 4-hour sessions per week, usually on Tuesdays starting at 1 p.m. US Eastern and Fridays at 1 p.m. US Eastern. But if you subscribe to the channel, All you have to do is subscribe and you'll be notified of live streams as they start, or just put them in your calendar. We try to be very consistent, and unless I have a specific work task that can't be moved, my superior has been great in just letting me continue to do this. And I think it's been a wonderful resource for people to learn, and I think it's built a wonderful community. All right, so Jaya Records is looking to see if there's anyone else from Sri Lanka. Welcome to our live stream. Thanks for joining us. All right, so we see John is now subscribed. Thank you. Okay, question from Neurotic Nexus. Greg, the only thing that the metronome, which bugs me, is the missing option to type in hertz values for the pitches of the custom sounds. I'm so used to double click and just type. So let's go ahead and take a look. So let's go, it's not to this window, but let's go to the metronome setup. So I guess while you can't type in the hertz values, you can adjust it, with the slider. But I'll pass that along, as I think it defaults to 999. We'll just do 1K here. But let me see if I could just yeah. All right. Well, I'll pass that along just to send that feedback in. Okay. All right, just reading through different comments. So my chat field jumped on me. Just bear with me. All right, just got an email from Ammon Tobin, so I'll have to reach out to him after the live stream. Wonderful artist. All right, just trying to find my spot. Okay. Okay, so we have a question to those who know, what's the real tweak in the Steinberg audio power scheme, as it is giving you a warning when you enable it? So a lot of times we see this with laptops, and if you're not familiar with this, where this function is, if you go to the studio setup and click on the audio system, where you'll see, and you see it on Windows, you'll see here, for use Steinberg audio power scheme. So a lot of times when computers, we see this, as I mentioned, laptops being very guilty of this. Laptops, one of their highest priority is battery life, and how they get longer battery life is to throttle and sometimes slow down a computer's processor. So when we're working with digital audio, we don't necessarily want a longer battery life and have half of the voices be able to play back. So, people will plug in. So what that preference, the Steinberg power scheme allows you to do is to utilize the full bandwidth of your computer's processor. So it's not throttling for like, an energy efficient mode of working. So that, will make sure that your computer is utilizing all the power that it has and is not trying to be kind of green energy compliant and basically filtering out 50% of your processing while you're doing that. Question: if I use an external device as a compressor / delay or whatever, do I have some CPU power, or an external hardware needs more CPU? So generally when you're using an external processor, that's not going to utilize any CPU. It's just sending audio. It may utilize a tiny, tiny bit, but it's basically sending the audio in, out of the audio interface, and the external processing and external effects can be configured by going to your audio connections and going to external effects. So at this point, you can say, okay, let's come over here. I have this in, these are my ins and outs of where this compressor is connected. So often when you're running a compressor plugin to emulate the functionality of hardware, that's going to take CPU cycles. And depending upon which plugin you're using, some plugins will take more CPU than others, but sending the audio out and bringing the audio back in and letting the process occur is very, very minimal. It's just basically playing the audio in and out of the system. All the processing is done by the external is not taking away any processing power whatsoever of your computer. So, it may take just a fraction of processing, tiny, tiny, tiny bit of fraction just to play the audio back, and, maybe shift the timing to compensate for delay compensation, which Cubase can do automatically, but it's not going to utilize your CPU to do that. So it's not going to be a hit. Okay, so just see from Neurotic Nexus background, I'm running a new Intel 11th generation test system with i5 11600K in default BIOS mode, meaning no fixed core speed nor disabled power states, etc. I am seeing real-time fluctuation in Cubase in the normal power scheme, that 5 to 100% CPU speed range, which gets better as I set manually to 100 to 100% minimum maximum speed. Perhaps that's also what the Steinberg power scheme does. Yeah, so I think it's basically just doing that. So it's always maximizing the most power that your computer is offered, is providing. And as Jazz Dudes mentioned, it says it's basically running the CPU at 100% because default Windows is some economy mode. So yes. Seeing some great discussion on trackballs versus mice. So. Right, reading through comments. Okay. Hi, Greg. So question, can you invert the mix console with the project window so the mix console is on top? Thanks once again. So if we wanted to not have the lower zone, we could just come here. I'm going to bring this down. And let's say it's not set up by default, but if you wanted to, you could come over here and just have, a mix console, and let's say at this point I don't want to have, we'll come over here. So if I wanted my mix console to be on top, I could treat it as separate windows and store that as a workspace. So that's, you could do that, but it's kind of, designed for the mix console kind of at the bottom zone. But if you really wanted it in the upper zone, you could do that as well, just by kind of reconfiguring the windows. So let me just get back to where I was. But it's not like there's an option to flip to top from the lower zone. So. All right, so to see great teacher, how to put the number on the score. So let's go ahead and just take a quick look. We'll jump back to our Bach piece. Okay, so let's take a look. So I think if we come over here, maybe to project, we could say notation style. So if it's, I'm not sure if it's page numbers or measure numbers. So we can see our measure numbers indicated here. And probably, let's look under notation style. So we see bar numbers. We could show every first number bar line, below the bar lines, auto space. So there's a number of different settings there. Let's see if there's for page numbers as well. So let me just, so, but for bar numbers, you could just kind of come right over here to bar numbers. So go to project to notation style. And then you could set whether you want the bar numbers to be visible or not. All right, wonderful to see JVI on the live stream, and you don't have to apologize for being late and helping your daughter with homework. I'll have to do that right after I finish the live stream on my end. So it's a good thing to do. Okay, so we see from John, as you all know, I'm one of those people who doesn't use Cubase, not even 60%. I have no idea what the control room is. Is there any place to read about it? So what the control room functionality is going to do, a lot of times, when we work on a large format console, you'll see lots of different functions for, bringing in different sources or switching speakers. And most software, programs don't really have an equivalent of that. So this is kind of what the control room does. So it kind of started off where we saw a lot of people working with their control room, and people would go take the audio output of their interface, connect it to powered speakers, and they would use their master volume as a monitoring volume. And as we do this, realize that if we look at the signal on our master fader here, that as we drop this, just to monitor that we are adjusting the gain structure of the mix. So if I have this and I want it to be louder or softer, we could use the control room. And as I adjust the volume here, we can not affect the gain structure of the master fader, of the master bus. This is also going to give me some capability to dim. So if I want it to be quieter by a certain amount, if I wanted to go to a reference point, say this is the loudest that I want to mix at. That's where I'm normally mixing at. Anything louder, I'm lying to myself. We could also come over here and go to down mix presets. So I could say, I just wanted to come here to my down mix presets and listen to it in mono. Now, as we're working with this, we may have different sets of speakers. So often people have a piece of hardware that colors the sound, and we could use the available inputs and outputs of our audio interface to come over here and switch between our different monitor speakers. So if I wanted to come right over to, let's say, we'll go to our monitors section. I can say, okay, I want to listen to my Yamahas or JBLs or Genelecs or Oratones. We could just switch between those speakers. And if we needed to set independent volume control for each of the speakers so that when we switch, one doesn't sound better just because it's louder, we could do that and run plugins. Our control room also allows us to have different headphone mixes for different musicians. So if the vocalist wanted to hear more of themselves when they were recording, the bass player more of themselves, we could set up independent headphone mixes, and you have a talkback source so that you could actually communicate directly with the different musicians that you're recording. So those are some of the functions of the control room. So. Okay. All right, reading through comments. Thanks for all the great discussion. If you've learned something new, make sure you hit the like button and also that you subscribe to the channel. All right, just reading through different comments and discussions. All right, so we see Michael Pierce, who's British, says, to my American Cubase users, how did Colorado end up so rectangular? I might be multi-tabbing at the moment. So I think it's based on the 40th parallel. So that's how a lot of the states, if you see kind of from Tennessee all the way over, it's the 40th parallel. So there's a really interesting documentary series of how the states got their shapes. So. Okay, just reading through more comments. Yeah, I see Randy Lee also just how the states got their shapes. Very interesting. Yeah, it's a great series. All right, so you just see a question. Does Cubase have freeze tracks? So if you wanted to freeze tracks with, all the processing, all you had to do is we see this little snowflake right here. So we could just click on freeze audio channel. We could add a tail size, and this will automatically just render that track with all of the processing kind of embedded in it. And then that track is frozen. Now it's just going to play back as an audio file. And if you wanted to unfreeze it to do editing, just click on this snowflake icon again. And if you wanted to unfreeze and keep the files, you could do that, or just choose to unfreeze, and that will delete the rendered audio files in the background. Okay, so we see a question. Does VST Connect do MIDI? If yes, how? So it's going to be in VST Connect Pro. Will allow you to do MIDI, but the VST Connect SE doesn't. So basically, you can pick like one of the instruments that comes with Cubase and be able to kind of play the MIDI resources that way. You see from Jeff Zabowski, DC offset, cool. I did capture a reel-to-reel transfer with asymmetrical wave shape. So yeah, give that a try. You see from Jeff Zabowski's, he thanks my supervisor too. So I don't think he knows how much I really kind of do with this stuff, but I have a new person I'm reporting to last few months, but he's let me do my thing. So seems like a good guy. Okay. All right, so we see Randy Lee, just thanks for doing this. And a great point from Sven Isaacson regarding Cubase and MIDI keyboards. Make sure you break the connection between the keyboard and sound generation by selecting local off, or do not engage monitoring on the channel. Otherwise, you'll have the polyphony by half the polyphony by triggering each note twice. This is a common mistake. So that's a great point. Thank you, Sven, for making that. Okay, so we just see which is the shortest way to get the cursor to a specific place: beginning, left, right, beginning, left or right mark. So if I wanted to, let's go to this where I have maybe different events. So if I just want to, let's say if I cut up this part here multiple times. So you see, I'm just going to hit the left and right arrow, and that will kind of take me to the next event. Just like that. So I can go to, so that's probably the fastest way. So if I wanted to come over here and navigate to the start or end of an event, you could just do that with using the left and right arrow keys on your computer keyboard. See, great comment from Graham. These live streams are just wonderful and so informative, and the community is great too. Thank you. So thanks for being a part of the live stream, or, it wouldn't be, that's what makes it great too. So I think, I learned something new with every live stream, and hopefully other people do as well. Neurotic Nexus is a great comment. Funny thing, I feel like Greg is now chasing, getting so close to our chat. Yeah. Occasionally I have, I'll catch up occasionally, see how I'm doing on time. So yeah, doing pretty well. All right, so just see a question from Gareth, his project he sent me to play bass on. Did the chords make sense in the end? Better to get Mike's description than my attempts at the bridge. So yeah, I got Mike's descriptions as well. So I think I'm great. So thanks for sending the chords. It's always makes it much faster for me. So I should have some time maybe tomorrow to get the bass part done. Thanks for sending it over. Looking forward to other songs. Question: when I drop a MIDI file on an empty track, how can I assign the sounds from the VST instruments? So you want to go to preferences, to MIDI file, and you'll see destination. So here you may want to choose this to be instrument tracks. It defaults to Hallian Sonic SE multi-timbral, which is great if you have like a general MIDI file and you want it to play back, like your drums on MIDI channel 10 and, good piano on channel 1, kind of like a standard GM or, XG/GS MIDI file. So you're able to play that back. But if you wanted to assign, I would just choose instrument tracks here, and then you could go and assign all the sounds after. So go to preferences to MIDI file and change the destination probably to instrument tracks there. All right, so we have a question from JVI. Since the new patch, Windows 10, Cubase Pro 11.0.020, perhaps it is my PC. Cubase takes even longer to start up. Once a project loaded, I have to wait another 30 seconds. Any ideas? So check to make sure that you have the latest version. Usually with new Windows operating system updates, make sure that you have the latest e-licenser installed, and that may just kind of speed it up and take care of that for you. All right, question. Is it true opening more single Hallian Sonics on separate track that the multi-core can utilize it better than if you loaded many slots of the 16 on one track? That is true. One thing to be aware of with like Hallian Sonic, I think we have some. So let's say if I have a Hallian Sonic SE or in Hallian as well, one of the things that you could do is, if you go to options, there's this little multi-core function. So you could, you could specify how many cores that Hallian Sonic or Hallian will use. I think the default recommendation is, like, if you have a 12 core system, maybe use 2 less than the number of cores that you're using. And that could allocate more of the processing across multiple cores, but not all instruments have that. So when I've done my experiments, I've found it to be a little more CPU friendly, like multi-core utilization, a bit more, used more when doing single instances. But if you're using Hallian, you can tell Hallian to use more, to use multiple cores. Other samplers, I'm not sure if you have that option. To see great comment from Neurotic Nexus. While testing the new box, I just want to highlight how much I like the Blockbuster sound set. Really great thing if you work on sounds for small audiobooks or similar. So, yeah, a lot of people don't utilize the built-in content, and another one that's really fabulous. They're all really good for different things, but check out Noir. And this is Robert Dudzik. So it's a lot of like cool, like these kind of, for cinematic stuff. And even like those little impacts. So, and also if you get a chance, check out Robert Dudzik's videos on like how he does what he does. It's just amazing. Like, him going to junkyards and recording all the sounds and, just taking apart his kitchen and sampling everything. It's really wonderful. Just such a great human. Okay, we have a question. What advantage does the Intro Dorco have that Score in Cubase Pro may not? Thanks. Once you get into it, there's going to be, you can achieve many of the same things, but, some of the aspects will be coming from a notation first perspective. Like, for a composer who starts with a blank staff as their starting point as opposed to a template, that kind of workflow. And there's some, nifty, like, I wanted to take a whole, 16 measures of, I put in eighth notes and I wanted to make it a dotted eighth and this followed by a 16th note. I could select those and just hit period. And just kind of, it's a different workflow. I think you could get, amazing results in either program. But, you could get the Dorco SE, download it free and, learn it and, get used to some of the workflows. And some stuff, it may be faster to do, like, it's like a step entry thing. If you have to do just a quick, I want to give you a music lesson, it may be faster to do that in Dorco than, doing a whole production and utilizing the score from Cubase. See Jeff Sabelski mentioning master fader always stays at 0 dB. It's a fundamental rule of mine, so that's a good rule to have. You see that Michael Pierce will be reading more on how the states got their shape. So I think the whole series was based on a book. So question, are you still able to make random hi-hat volume adjustments in the editor itself without going to menu? Love the new Cubase 11. Wow. So let's take a quick look. So this is a great function for the logical editor and a really wonderful aspect of it. So let's say if I want to Okay, so let's say if I just wanted to put like a little drum part together here. Okay, so let's say I just wanted to come here and let's make like a really hideously boring. And I'll just take my control room up here. Okay, so let's say I just come here. Okay, now let's say I just wanted to make like the worst hi-hat pattern of all time that so many people do. I just want to come here and okay, so now I want to take the hi-hats. Let's say these are an F sharp 1. And if I go to my logical editor, at this point, we could choose to say, okay, I want to transform, and we'll say MIDI notes, and we're going to say the note is equal to, let's say, F sharp 1. And I wanted to take value 2, and we could say randomize values between 60 and 90. So if I did this, we're going to now randomize the hi-hats velocity. Okay. So now you can see that I just do this and now it's going to play back kind of just, and you could apply random velocities. Now you could also do something like I want to take of all of these notes, I want to take every other note. So let's say we'll do last event, and we'll say every other event. And we'll do an event counter, and we'll say 2. And I wanted to set value 2. And let's come here and say, let's subtract 40. So now I'll just come here. So you could do stuff like that as well, or every other third note randomize. So those are some of the cool things that you do to make hi-hats a little more realistic in MIDI drum programming. All right, so you see from Norm Williams, Greg, I pulled in a sample and the music mode did not show up. What was the over option? Also, the message states no external sync. So let me know if you pulled in, you know, if it's going to be something like a one-shot sound. So let's say if I wanted to come here and, you know, if it's like just something like a one-shot sound, you know, that probably wouldn't be in musical mode. That may not make a difference. But if it's going to be in, you know, something like a drum loop. So again, just a drum loop, kind of dragging that in. And we can see that if that's not set to musical mode and I drag this over, and we'll sell this track. So I'll just kind of take this, and we can see that it's not going to fit in with our current beats as we play. And now selecting it and putting it in musical mode there, then, and you could adjust different algorithms here. So if I just say, okay, let's just make it a time. So now, and when it says, usually you don't get a message saying no external sync. Make sure that you may have accidentally turned Cubase. There's a setting here for, external sync. And if you have that turned on, that maybe it's, try turning that off. But, it could be just with the, you're under your transport, and you might have just accidentally checked instead of like the project synchronization setup, maybe, or metronome setup, that you accidentally activated external sync. So make sure that that's unchecked, perhaps in the menu, or if you have it enabled here in the transport. Okay, feature request from Mark. Not sure if this is available yet in Cubase, but it'd be great if we had sends on faders. It would make working with sends and the mixes much easier. So I've kind of passed that along, so I'll pass it on again. So I agree with you on that. So we see it on a lot of large format live consoles, just kind of speed things up. All right, so we see from Sound Factory Studio, awesome tips, thanks. You're welcome. So thanks for joining us in the live stream. All right, so we have Ted Moose checking in, or Ted Musk checking in from England. All right, and we answered this earlier, but just in case you missed it, it says my presets don't show up for Retrolog and Groove Agent on 11 Pro. Anyone else had this problem? So try going to your media menu, to Media Bay, and just make sure you'll see under VST Sound on the left-hand side here. And if you don't see this, make sure you have the left pane activated here in the upper right-hand corner. Go to VST Sound and look for all of your Groove Agent sets. You can make sure that there's a check next to the folder. And if you see a check and you click here and you're not seeing anything, right-click on the folder and choose to rescan disk. All right, question. I have my MR816 CSX and 816X, a Behringer 8200 all working. My question now is, direct monitoring is constantly on and grayed out. It used to be available to turn on or off. Any help would be great. So when we come to the direct monitoring for the MR, we could just come over here. So we select this, and you could see the direct monitoring enabled here. See if you have an audio hardware setup, and it could be an 11 under more options here, but you may have something that says like audio hardware setup, which is like a little utility program that allows you to control the MR816. If you don't see like an audio hardware setup, and it may be under more options, I would try to reinstall just the tools for the MR816 and try to reinstall that, because sometimes there's I'm trying to remember what it's called, but it's in one of the tools, and you'll see it probably, if you just reinstall that, then the direct monitoring should be able to be turned on if you don't have that, Vinny. Okay, so we see, hi, I want key command for drum editor, show only used instruments. I cannot find this, so let's take a look. So it's going to be under okay, so it's going to be found under pitch visibility on off. So let's come over, see if we can find that. Okay, so look under MIDI to pitch visibility on off. So let me just give that a shot, see if I could assign it to a keyboard shortcut. Okay, so I'm just going to assign a keyboard shortcut to that. I hit OK, and now let's make this the... Just check my key command again. Okay, so I'm going to assign it this time. That would help. All right. Yep. So go to edit key commands, and under MIDI, you'll see pitch visibility on off, and you could set a key command for that. Okay, we have a question. Is there a way to listen in mono to my mix in the artist version? So there may be a plugin. So let's do a quick... Just go to... Just try another plugin here quickly. Thank you for all the wonderful questions. I hope everyone's learned a tip or trick. And if you learned something, make sure you hit the like button or just subscribe to the channel. All right, so say we have Cubase Artist, and I think there might be a plugin. If you just come over to, say, under Spatial Panner, you might have one that's the Stereo Enhancer. So let's say if I'm playing back my project here. Let it be, hit the road, gonna rock, gonna roll, and just put that, so try the width here, and try just to move that to all the way to 0%. So that's kind of like enhancing the width. This is where it is. And that'll kind of get you your mono effect. So I would try that. And again, that's just going to be the Stereo Enhancer plugin. I think that might come in artist version. I'm not absolutely 100% certain, but I think that'd be a good thing to look for. All right, so we see from Jeff Sabelsky, Howling Sonic 3 is so mind-blowing. I really love it. So much stuff to learn still. So, yeah. All right, quick help needed. Where does Cubase store the click sounds for metronome again? Currently lost in browsing through various folders. So let's see if I can find it quickly. So it could be different on Windows, but it's probably going to be in your application data folder. But let's see. So click, so under presets, so you go to your application data folder, presets, and then you'll see click sound sets. And then here's all the different presets there. Okay, reading through more comments. Thanks for all the great discussion. Okay, so we have a question from Bongo John. Sorry, my chat field just moved on me. Instead of shelving EQs per channel, how do you route channels via groups to apply generalized shelving of EQ of several guitar tracks without affecting reverbs and delays on said channels? Okay, so let's say if I want to take my guitars on this, okay, just going to reread it again here. Okay, so I'm just going to send these to a stereo group, and I'll just put it outside the folder. I don't mind it being ugly here. So I have my guitars here. So if I wanted to now just EQ the group, I could just come over here. And that's all the guitars. So let me know if that's what you wanted to do, Bongo John. So you could just kind of do, you know, or me even more kind of shelving EQs here. So if I just say, let's go to turn this on. You can just do shelving on kind of all your guitars just like that. Okay, so we have a question. Piece of music with mistakes, no drums, audio MIDI are so far off the beat in of itself. I have to manually tap beats, but quarter notes, hard work. So if I do per bar, how does Cubase calculate the 2, 3, 4? So you could kind of treat this a couple different ways. So with a, I'll show you the time warp tool. So if I wanted to kind of manually, you know, you could get down and say, okay, I want to figure out every 16th note or every bar, every beat, you know, but if you wanted to do this for, let's say I look at this and I want to see bars and beats, and I'm going to switch my tool here to the time warp tool. So I can say this is going to be... So if I wanted to do this process manually, I could say this is where I want, you know, -1 bar. So, and you could now at this point say this is where the next bar falls. And after a while, it will just kind of keep the same values. So you could now just kind of hopefully come here. Let's see if I eyeballed it. And I think if you hold down a modifier key, you could kind of keep that same value after. So let's see. Let's see if it was shift, maybe control, or maybe alt. There used to be a modifier key. So here, if you wanted to do, just the beats, but if you needed to, or the bars, but if you needed to tweak the beats, you could, if you wanted to, and just kind of do the tempo map. So it will just kind of maintain that within the measure, but you could tweak within the measure if needed as well. You see, people are scared I'm going to catch up. All right. I think you guys are probably way far ahead of me, but thanks for all the great questions. All right, so just see a question, are you going to mix today? So it's really, we just kind of want to just answer questions that people have. So if you have something like how to mix this, or this is a problem I'm in, then we kind of answer this, but it's more of a interactive Q&A session. All right, we see Gareth has to take off. So thanks for joining us, Gareth. Looking forward to the next song to play bass on. All right. All right, so we just see Jeff Sabelski says reinstall tools for MR. Now my direct monitoring is no longer grayed out, so that's great. Okay, we have a question. Can you please help understanding sidechaining reverb? Okay, so I haven't done this in a while, but it's... Go ahead and I'll just switch to a different project here. So I think some people, there's a couple of different approaches on it. So some people may duplicate the track here. So I'm going to take so let's go ahead and duplicate this track. Okay, and I wanted to set up my reverb channel. So here I think I have just my reverb. Like my reverence reverb. So I'll go to my reverb return channel. And I'll just put a compressor kind of before. Okay, and so let's say I wanted to take this. I think often we would, not sure what's not showing up, but let's just give this track a different name. Okay. Okay, so now as we do this, so right now we're sidechaining the and I'm just gonna put like a really loose reverb on that particular track. So I want this to feed to sidechain. All right, so let me just.
Something's wrong. We can't go on living alive. How can I feel you? How can I see you when you're running high from the light?
So we have like a lot of reverb. So let's say we'll just rewind. Now I'll kick this channel in.
Something's wrong. We can't go on living.
So while she's singing, you don't hear a lot of reverb. So you could kind of, let's make it just a really large reverb. So that's kind of a technique, sometimes just putting a compressor and sidechaining the compressor on the reverb return channel. That sometimes is a way that some people will, use the ability to kind of sidechain reverbs. Okay. Okay, so you see, hey, Greg, can we get a feature to squeeze MIDI notes inside the key editor? For example, when you use the resize applies time stretch tool with the MIDI clip, it squeezes the MIDI notes. So I don't know of a way you could kind of do it, not as graphically. So if you're not familiar with this, if we come over here and we change our sizing, we could do a sizing applies time stretch here. And as I do this, it'll just basically compress all of the MIDI notes to playback. So when you listen to this, it'll be just kind of ridiculously fast. So we're kind of basically time compressing the MIDI notes, but to do within the MIDI editor, so there isn't kind of an exact equivalent function, but I know what some people do is there's logical editor functions where we could say, I just wanted to take this, and it's not necessarily like a slider type of, sorry for hitting my mic, it's not necessarily a slider type of function, but there are where we could choose to like double or half the time. So say I just wanted to double tempo. So you could come over here, and as we listen to this now, so you could set up, the keyboard shortcut to varying degrees. So with that function again, I could just double the time, and you can see that all the rhythms will just become. So it kind of gets you to the same place, but it's not a nifty little slider. But if you needed to do that in a pinch, you could definitely do that. Again, that's just double the tempo. So we're taking the notes and we're adjusting the length and the position, dividing by 2. So you could set up different, relationships with that. So if you want, 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, etc. Okay, so we have a follow-up question. Is there a calendar for these live streams? I need to schedule it ahead of time. So we do them starting Tuesdays and Fridays, starting at 1 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time. So if you subscribe to the channel, make sure you do that. Just subscribe to the channel, and you'll be notified. But just think, and depending where you live, so it's 1 p.m. U.S. Eastern, which is 10 a.m. Pacific, which is 6 p.m. I think in the UK, and 7 p.m. in Central Europe, and middle of the night for Asia and Australia. They probably hate me for this, but it works well for me. So a new question, is there a way to bookmark time on the live streaming so that I can review the answer anytime? So if you want to, what I do after the live stream, I take like an hour break, rest my head for a little bit, and then I'll go back and watch the live stream again, and we enter timestamps with all the topics covered. So you could just kind of look at the question and click on the link, and it'll take you directly to that question. Also, there's a wonderful resource. If you go to cubaseindex.com, there's a wonderful resource there where you could just search for any topic that's been covered on live streams. I think Jan kind of takes my index and kind of, builds a searchable database from that so you could find stuff. So check out the cubaseindex.com. But, by tonight there will be a full, all the topics with timestamps. Hang on just one second. My son is knocking on the door. Apologize. All right. Sorry for the delay. Okay. All right. Okay, so we have a question. What is the difference between Sound Browser and Loop Browser? So when we want to come over here, we can think of these as both kind of subsets of the media bay. So the Loop Browser is going to be, just looking at audio loops. So at this point, we could see just audio loops. When we go to the Sound Browser, we could think of this as being more presets for instruments. So it's kind of a pre-done configuration where, okay, I'm looking for instrument sounds, I can go here. Or I'm looking for loops, I go to Loop Browser. So it's just kind of the default states that will show up in these particular modes, and, some people just get used to looking for everything in the media browser or the media bay, or just on the right hand side media bay where everything can be nicely found. But it just kind of gives you a predetermined starting point so you don't have to set up any filters. All right, so question. In supervision, is it possible to assign key command or MIDI CC to reset all the modules? So if we go to our supervision plugin, let's go to inserts on our main tab, and we have supervision. So there is a reset function directly here. So I don't think it could be addressed via key command, but let's take a look if we could do it maybe via generic remote. So let's say, let's go to our generic remote. I want to learn this MIDI note message, and let's take a look. Okay, so let's. Let me see if it's available maybe in. So let me just try to put it on the stereo out. I'll just try the control room one more time here. So it could depend on where you have the. Let me see if sub 403 indicates. Okay, so I'm going to see if we put it on the master fader of our mix console. We might be able to do it from there as opposed to. Okay, and let's see if it's resettable there. All right, so I go to my supervision and let's see. No, so it doesn't look like you could reset it. So the only area to kind of reset it is for all of the modules is when you're kind of doing it here. It's just kind of hold down. I think if you hold down Alt, so you could reset an individual module. Or if you hold down Alt or Option, you could reset all modules. Just like that. But I don't know a way of doing it with a keyboard shortcut or like a MIDI message, unfortunately. But you can do it, just you might have to click with the Alt or Option key. So let's see. Question. I feel I know the answer beforehand. Can you confirm where the English chapel? Can you confirm where the English chapel was IR'd? I mean, I think I know, but just wondered it could be stated. Sorry for being difficult, Greg. So I don't know exactly. I have a sense where it was, but it's. I think it was originally done. I think years and years ago, Yamaha did a convolution reverb in hardware, and I think some of the original IR responses were derived from that unit. So, but I don't know for sure. But if you have a good idea, you probably understand English geography better than I can, better than I do. So. Okay, so we see from Jorge, I do have the stereo enhancer in Cubase Artist. I tried to put it in the stereo out, but it didn't work for the mono mix yet. How do I send all my tracks to this plugin? So, doing it as an insert on the, doing it as an insert on a mono out again, just kind of, when I'm just kind of doing this, so say as we're listening.
Ground, not a sound. Tell me
So let's say I'll go to my spatial.
something's wrong. We can't go on living a lie.
So now,
How can I feel you?
so make sure that I'm doing it pre-fader, but I don't think it'll make a huge difference if I do post-fader for that. So
How can I see you when you're running high from the light?
so make sure you're running as an insert on the stereo bus, and give that a try. Okay, so we have a question from the Netherlands. How can I remove MIDI notes, say under velocity of 10 at once? Greetings from the Netherlands. Okay, so let's say if I have a bunch of MIDI notes here. All right, and some will be okay, so let's say I just want to get rid of the low MIDI notes that have velocity less than 10. So I would go to MIDI, to Logical Editor, and I want to delete notes. And let's say on that have a value 2, which is your velocity, that is less than 10. So now hit apply, and all the notes that had less than 10 and let's say less than 20, just come right over here, hit apply, and all those notes would be gone just like that. So once again, under function, delete, on the filter target, type is equal to note, velocity is less than 20, delete. And then that will, or less than 10. Right. So yeah, I was seeing Michael Pierce saying a company my dad worked for did the IRs and shotguns purely for RT60s and the 90s, and that plus one other detail makes me think I know where it was, but it's a discussion for the Zoom. So, all right. All right, so we see Sven is now downloaded and installed his Dorco SE. So question, can we run Cubase 11 on Big Sur? Yes, definitely. So no problem at all. Okay, so I think I hit the end of the chat field, so I guess we can move on to some of the questions that were mailed in. So let me open up that list. Okay, question. Hey, Greg, is there a way to open up old Cubase 3 files, .arr, ./.all in Cubase Pro 10.5? So the last version of Cubase that imported .all and .arr files was Cubase SX3, SL3, SE3. So your Cubase 10.5 license will run the earlier versions. So your 10.5 will run 10, 9, back to SX3, SL3, or whatever level you're at. So you could download from the Steinberg website and install Cubase SX3. It'll run off of your current Cubase 10.5 license, and in there you'll see import.all, import.arr files, and then save it as a CPR file. So, so that's how you could do it. And, like maybe 6 years ago or so, I was helping Alan Holdsworth get all of his Cubase Atari files, migrated over to his Mac. And yeah, they miraculously all just, were able to be converted over without any problems. Okay, so I think we answered this question in the live stream already. Okay, so the question is, I can't seem to locate it. Maybe I forgot. I'm using an instance of Retrolog 2, and I want to switch banks in the middle of a section, but I can't seem to automate A to B. Is this something that was introduced recently? I'm on Cubase 9. Is it accessible through remote control editor? Thanks for reading. So I don't think a lot of the current VST instruments respond to program changes. So I think what most people will end up doing is just making two different tracks. It's unlike a traditional piece of hardware where maybe you wanted to switch sounds. You could just load up different tracks and run multiple instances of the plugin, and maybe they don't occur concurrently, but I don't think that it will respond to program changes. We'll give it a quick shot here really quickly. So let's say if I have Retrolog here, and let's say just have some program changes. So, and let's go ahead and just open up the instrument. And let's say as we kind of do the program changes here, so hit play, it's going to stay on the same. So I think you might have to just run multiple instances of it. There are A and B settings, but I don't think that's really automatable. So you might have to run two different tracks of Retrolog. So, but if you have it on, depending on your preferences, you could have that. So it's not taking up, it's only utilizing the CPU resources of instruments that are playing back at that particular moment. Okay, so we had a question, I think it's from Sven. There's a significant, when using VST Connect, there is a significant loss of audio level between what's leaving Cubase and what is received by VST Connect Performer. I've done a test where I sent a stable 440 hertz sinus tone from Cubase. What is received by VST Connect Performer is barely half the level. All faders are set at unity gain. So let's say if I have, let's see if I could get on with my computer here quickly. Hang on just a second. I have a laptop here inside. Okay, so now you get to see lovely views of my office view here. All right. So when I'm sending to VST Connect, let's say we'll switch over to our mixer view. The one thing, it's not necessarily the mix console levels that really matter. So let's say if I have this and I have this kind of playing. Okay, so I could see these levels here in the master, and whatever these levels are, they don't necessarily have such, if those are all set, that's fine. But what's critical that a lot of people miss is it's going to be the Q send that is controlling the levels. So if the Q mix isn't sent, so this is what's going out to the performer when what they're hearing. So if your mix console is set all the way up but your Qs aren't, that would kind of indicate that the performer is not getting the best level. So it's not going to be necessarily what the level is in, this is a factor. Your control room can be a factor, for your monitoring, your master fader. But, this is the critical one. It's the Q send that's going to be sending it to the actual performer here. So as we just kind of have that down, but my level's up, we don't see a lot of the signal going to our Q mix for the performer. So check that. That's the really critical component. All right. Okay, so all right, so we had a couple questions with this. Okay, when Cubase is put in play or record, the talkback should disengage automatically. It doesn't. Is this a setting or a bug? So, when you're doing that, when you're doing a VST Connect session and you're doing, typical kind of recording scenarios, you may just notice that the talkback is going to be engaged because often you're going to be communicating directly with, the musician. And as you're communicating, with the musician, that's why the talkback is engaged. So what I have set up is just like a macro. So when I stop or, hit record, at that point, I just have it where it's not going to be, on the performer channel. So say if I'm recording here, that, that the talkback is just going to be disengaged. But there isn't a setting, I believe. Let me just check preferences in the control room. But I could pass along maybe while Cubase is in record, deactivate talkback. Let me just... So I don't think there's a setting for that, but I could kind of pass that along. We could dim the Q during the talkback, but I could see if maybe that could be added as a preference. I'll pass that along. Okay, so question 3, I intend to record electric guitar using an amp simulator. I found a fee-limited version of Amplitude 5, which is fortunate since VST amp rack can't be used. I want to hear the affected sound, but only record the clean signal. The way this is normally done is simply to insert an amp simulator plug-in on the channel being recorded, performer record. However, this doesn't work with VST Connect simply because it requires that the performer record track is set to monitoring mode. This is not allowed with VST Connect. The result is that I only hear the affected audio on playback and only on clean signal during recording. This could also be an issue in recording vocals since I have no way to add reverb during recording without recording the effect. Since input doesn't have sends, this is not an option either. It looks that Steinberg has given a lot of thought to the performer side, but somehow forgotten the engineer. These solve big serious implications on usefulness of VST Connect. So within the VST Connect, one thing to be aware of is that you can have, let's take a look at the VST Connect Pro here. I'm not sure of like the technical limitations, but there is built-in reverb for monitoring, the vocalist right there. So, while you can't necessarily have, I'm not sure if there's technical reasons of why you can't, just put it as inserts for recording, like we would monitor different plugins. I didn't get a chance to check this out right before, but I could check with the team and see if there's any specific, technical reasons why that isn't implemented, to make sure and pass along that feedback. Okay, so we got this from Johnny Diaz. It has happened twice that some audio tracks disappear from my project window, but they show up in the pool. How that happens, and is there a way to bring them back into the project without importing and dragging them one by one? So if you have an audio file and it's in the pool, so right now we have this performer record 01, and we go to my pool window. At this point, you could, so I open my pool and we go to the pool window. I could just come over. So we see this particular audio file. So if this is erased, it's still been used in a project and will still be referenced in the audio in the pool window. So we'll come over here, so the audio file can, once it's been erased. So if you still see it in a pool, it may have been accidentally deleted. So let's say if I come over here and I have, loops and samples and I drag these in. Okay, so let's say I have these files and we open our pool window, and I'll just do it so that it will stay open. So, sorry, just getting in our phone call. All right, so we do this, and so let's go ahead and erase these two files. So, and open the pool window again. So that these two files are still there, but if you wanted to, so I don't think that there's like a restore to where it was. So my guess is that maybe you hit delete and it was selected. But if you just, drag it into the file, let's say if you're here, you can just go to edit and move to origin. And that will place it in like the timestamp position where it was before. So it may be a two-step process, but you could get it back to the same exact time position. Okay. Okay, so we have a question. Hi, I'm a user Cubase 11 Pro. I have several samples, in fact, hundreds on the same track that I need to export in their exact size. I would like to know if there's any faster, easier way to export these waves independently. I wonder if a track where these are recorded previously, and is there an easier, faster way to crop them independently to measure? Okay, so let's say we have a number of audio files here, and we wanted to, export these or render in place to different. Okay, so one of the things that we could do is use cycle marker export. So, if I wanted to take these, and let's say these have been edited, one thing that you could do is go to render in place. So let me just select, I'll select the track here. Let's go to render in place. You should be able to see it. Okay, I'll do the other method I was thinking of. So I want to add just like a cycle marker to each of these events. I'm going to add a marker track, and we're going to put the marker track above the actual file here. So, and I think I created a macro in a previous live stream. So, and what the macro is cycle marker to event length. So I just said transport locators to selection and then insert and name cycle marker. So if I wanted to come here, I will just run this macro. So I'll just say cycle marker to note event length, and I can assign this to a keyboard shortcut. So we'll give it a name, call it 1. And now I will select the next event. So if I have that selected, I could just select the event here, trigger the macro. And again, I could assign a keyboard shortcut to just trigger this macro. So we'll say cycle marks and then name it. We'll call it 2. And you could even select the next event as part of the macro. So this will automatically allow you to name it. And we'll do a couple more here. Okay, and we'll just do this 2 more times quickly. And once you have this kind of set to a keyboard shortcut, that can make it faster. So now we have each of these events that are tied to a particular the cycle marker. And now when I go to export audio mixdown, I'm going to choose to export based on cycle markers. So we could just kind of select all your cycle markers. And at this point, I want to come over here and say I want this to be we'll call it May 11th, 2021, but we could have different naming schemes. So I'm going to choose to have the naming scheme based on the cycle marker name. And then I want this to be just my stereo out. I'm going to add it to the queue and say start queue export. And then it'll just be exported directly out that way. Let me see. And then each of those independent files will be exported independently, just like that. So that's really kind of all you have to do. So just set up the cycle marker export, create the job, and then, you should be all set to go with that. And once you do that, then it'll create the independent files for you, even though they're all kind of on one particular track. All right, I think I had one that was emailed to me right before we started the live stream. So let me see if I can find that question. Bear with me just for a second. This came in like minutes before. All right. Okay, I've just set up an UR24C, but it won't work. I've downloaded and installed tools, but the UR shows up in the audio MIDI setup, and everything seems fine. When I play my Cubase projects in the built-in interface, Cubase works as it should on the built-in audio. But when I switch to UR24C, the rainbow wheel takes over and nothing happens. The firmware updater can't detect the UR, and the DSP mixer can't find the device. Any ideas of what to do? So it sounds like you're on Mac, but just make sure that as you're working with this, that you're not setting up you're not setting the audio interface from the audio setup here, but that you're actually setting up the audio interface from the studio setup and selecting the audio system. And at that point, defining the UR24C directly here. So also, make sure that, it seems like you've run the software, but it's not a traditional, plug and play interface. It will need to install a driver, but there is the mode on the back of the UR24C that will place it in class compliant mode. So you could use it with like an iPad or your, iOS phone, your iPhone, to make sure that switch isn't put into that mode and see if that makes a difference. All right, let's go back to our live discussions. Thanks for all the great questions. And I'm sure I have some more questions coming my way. So let me just... All right, so we see Agent K has done some moderation. We appreciate you for that. Okay, reading through some more questions and discussions. So thanks for all the great discussions. I hope everyone has learned something new. Okay, so we have a question. Is there a new external instrument editor in 11? Pretty sure I've seen it in new features, but can't find the video. So I don't think so. I think if we had an external instrument, so let's say if I have this, like someone had asked me to make one for an O1W that we just it might be like a slightly high DPI scale. But there, I know with like the external effects, if we wanted to come over here to like an audio insert and go to our external plugins, that this slightly changed instead of a little ping where you could choose to measure the delay. So it could be just that the UI component was updated for high DPI scaling. All right, there's a great comment. Greg, you are for our Cubase knowledge what Squasher is for an audio track. So not sure if that's a compliment or not, but I'll take it as one. All right, because Squasher is such a cool plugin. Okay, hey Greg, I've been having an issue exporting mixdowns. I can get it to work in real time, but when exporting running faster, the file says there is correct megabyte size, but there is no audio. Nothing's really kind of coming to mind for that, but let's, if you have external, check to make sure that, when you do your export audio mixdown, make sure that you're, that you have it set to like a wave and then an expected, audio sample rate and bit depth. And usually when that happens, it could be just maybe like a routing thing, or sometimes, like one thing that happens a lot to people, like if they have, like, if they're doing an export, I'll show you just quickly here. And let's say if I just wanted to add an instrument track, or we could do it with an audio track too. So, All right, so let's say I have an audio track, but I have this track in that's record enabled. So now if I do a mix down of it, so I'll just come here, let's do an export audio mix down, and I'll say, let's make a stereo single file, and I'm just going to import that to create an audio track. Let's add it to the queue, start queue export. So all right, let me just turn off the real time, off the plug-in here, the external effect. So, all right, so I will just start the queue export again. Sorry, it's just too annoying. So let me just try a smaller file here. Okay. So I'll remove this track. And so if this track is record enabled and I do my export audio mix down, and we'll create a new audio file. So we'll start the queue export. That's because I have the external instrument on. Okay, so now, so sometimes when you actually have the track record enabled, that could also affect I've seen that sometimes actually, result in a blank audio file. So check to make sure you don't have something record enabled. All right, so Michael Pierce wants people to smash the like button. All right, so just see a nice comment from John Shaman. I'm jealous of your patience. Cubase should be so happy to have someone like you. Thanks for your time. So I'm glad to help. So helps, my patience helps with my son too, I guess. But he's a great kid. All right, we got a couple minutes left. Let's see our questions. All right, wonderful to see Kai Wen Franklin on the live stream. All right. All right, Sven, I'll look at the VST Connect Performer, the picture again. But let me just look at it really quick here. All right, so just looking at, I see that you have in the picture you sent, the Q is circled, but I don't know what the Q mix level is on your audio tracks that you're sending to the musicians, Sven. So if you could send a picture of that, that would be helpful information. You see some. Thanks to Agent K for doing your moderation. appreciate it. Okay, so we have a question from Joseph K. How can I track a reverb into a session from outboard gear? So if you wanted to record the reverb, you could just take the outputs of the reverb to your audio interface, and you could also just, if you wanted to incorporate that during your mixdown process, is just go to your audio connections window, and you could define the reverb as your external instruments. And so you could add an external effects and say, okay, I just wanted this to be my reverb in stereo. And at that point, define the inputs and outputs. We'll call this reverb. And then you could just simply access it like, tell it where it's connected to your audio interface, or your converter. At that point, you could go to your sends here and just say, okay, I want to go to, add a return channel. So when you come here, you can say, let's add an effects channel, and we'll go under external plugins, and you could just call your reverb and make sure that you click on measure delay, and that will compensate for your any timing discrepancies of going in and out. So that will do your offsets for all your delay compensation. Okay, question. If I've recorded MIDI on multiple lanes, is there a way to merge all the MIDI events into one lane? Okay, so let's say I'll add a number of MIDI tracks. Okay, so I'll just come here. So really all you have to do is just take the MIDI parts. You could copy it on top of each other. And as you have MIDI parts here, just grab your glue gun and now click on it with your glue gun. And as you do that, all of the parts will now be merged into one single event. Hey, wonderful to see Kaiga on the live stream. I hope you're doing well. So great to see you. Miss seeing you in New York. So I just see a quick comment is probably about the marker macro. It says, but that cycle marker won't work if you have 10 audio tracks starting at bar 1. But I guess moving 10 tracks to one long track is a lot better than manual labor. So, the question was that they had hundreds of tracks on a single file, kind of all spread out throughout the timeline. So if they're all in single tracks, you could just do, normal batch export. And that would, take care of that for you without any problems. All right, we're just about out of time. So I just see from Jeff Sabelski says, will Iconica be available in the download software in my Steinberg pages besides using the download assistant? I'll take a look and see if there's some internal download. But if you want to email me again, I might be able to put it up on like a private download link for you temporarily. All right, with that, we're just about out of time. I want to thank everyone for wonderful questions. We'll see everyone back on on Friday at 1 p.m. I want everyone to stay safe and healthy, and send your questions in advance to clubcubase@steinberg.de. You can also look forward to seeing you on the chat, and also, thank you so much. And I hope everyone learned some great tips and tricks, and we'll see you on Friday's live stream. Take care.